Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says Indian interest at the WTO Ministerial Conference. Let us try and understand what is this article all about. Recently, the 12th WTO Ministerial Conference took place in Geneva. Members who were part of this ministerial conference discussed deliberated about number of issues. This included about the global vaccine equity, ensuring food security, subsidies to the fishery sector, continuing moratoriums with respect to the e-commerce, and all of these were discussed as part of this 12th WTO Ministerial Conference. Let us try and understand what were the key takeaways or the outcome of this 12th WTO Ministerial Conference. First up, let's understand brief background with respect to the World Trade Organization. What is this organization? As the very name denotes, we have the World Trade Organization. So this happens to be one of the organizations that basically deals with trade related aspects surrounding all the countries. This was founded back in the year 1995 and it currently has about 160 odd members, and basically it comes up with rules and regulations to govern some of the trade related aspect. Its basic aim is to promote free trade, and this is done via the trade agreements, and these are all discussed and signed ultimately by the member states. So the World Trade Organization provides a platform, provides a forum for the countries to negotiate all the trade deals that they wish to carry out in the near future. What is the structure of the World Trade Organization? When we speak about the World Trade Organization, at the top what we have is the Ministerial Conference, followed by the Dispute Settlement Body, General Council, Trade Policy Review Body. Further, we have the Committee on T&D and TNE, we have the Goods Council, we have the Intellectual Property Council, as well as the Services Council. So the Goods Council basically deals with the goods. These are the physical goods. Then we have services provided by the countries, and finally we also have countries in case they have issues to do with the intellectual property. This can be fixed as part of the Intellectual Property Council. Now, if we speak about the Ministerial Council, this is at the very top of the WTO's organizational chart. It meets once every 2 years. So remember, this can be very important from the preliminary examination point of view and can take decisions on all matters under any multilateral trade agreement. So the topmost decision making body of the World Trade Organization happens to be the Ministerial Conference, and this meets every 2 years, and it brings all the members of the World Trade Organization, all of which are either countries or the custom union. So the Ministerial Conference can take all the decisions on all matters under the multi-trade agreement. All decisions at the WTO are made collectively and through consensus among member countries at varied councils and committees. If we look into the Ministerial Conference, as of now, we had about 11 ministerial conferences. Which were these? The first Ministerial Conference happened in Singapore back in the year 1996. So remember, the first Ministerial Conference happened in 1996 where in Singapore, where the ministers of finance, trade, foreign and agriculture from more than 120 countries participated, and the issues that were discussed were trade and investment, trade facilitation, transparency in government procurement, trade and competition, and these were known as the Singapore issues. The second was in 1998, which happened in Geneva. The third is in 1999, which happened in United States of America, where the Uruguay round was discussed, and the fourth was in Qatar in 2001, and in 2003 what we had is the fifth in Mexico, and in 2005 we had the sixth one, and this is where the adoption of the Swiss formula came into picture. And as part of the assignment, you have to put on the comment section what do you understand by this Swiss formula. And the seventh happened in 2009 in Geneva in Switzerland, and the eighth happened in 2011 in Geneva, Switzerland, and the ninth happened in 2013 in Bali, and this is also called as the Bali package, and the 10th happened in 2015 in Nairobi. The 11th happened in Buenos Aires in Argentina in 2017, and in the year 2021 they should have conducted the 12th one, but because of the COVID related issues they were not able to conduct, and ultimately this was postponed. What was supposed to have been conducted in 2021 was recently held in Geneva as part of the 12th Ministerial Conference. So the WTO's 12th Ministerial Conference was held in Geneva from 12th to 17th of June, and this was supposed to end on 15th of June, but people had a lot of issues. They had intensifying negotiations, and ultimately this conference was extended by about 2 days. As an outcome of this conference, we have multiple issues that we have to discuss. One is in reference to the global food security. Second is in reference to the fishing subsidies. Third is in reference to the electronic transmission. The fourth is in reference to the COVID-19 vaccine production. First, let us try and understand about the global food security. Members agreed to a binding decision to exempt food purchased by the UN's World Food Programme for humanitarian assistance from any export restrictions. What do we understand by this? Let's assume for a moment we have countries like India or United States of America or United Kingdom. These countries would want to export food crops or the food items as part of the UN food program. In this particular case, there will be no restrictions imposed by that country if these crops are being sent as part of this particular program. So if it is being sent as part of this program, and if this crop is collected and used for the welfare purposes, humanitarian purposes elsewhere, then there will be no restriction imposed in that country. However, in case they have a domestic purpose, in case it is to do with the food security at their home, then they would be able to impose reasonable restrictions for the export. For example, we recently had issues with respect to the wheat exports. So what this currently goes on to say is that if we have the food security crisis back home, or we have to take care of our own people, we would be able to impose reasonable restrictions for the export. But if it is for the World Food Program and if it is for the humanitarian purposes, then export restrictions need not be imposed is the first thing. As part of this global food security program, negotiators were also not able to reach agreement on the permissible public stock holding. So we have number of countries which also have the public distribution system as well, where they safeguard the food items, and these food items will be given to the people. What should be the threshold, what should be the maximum quota that they would be able to reserve is yet not resolved and will be discussed as part of the future initiative. And some of the measures taken under this global food security program also includes that if a particular country has a surplus, they can release the same into the international market, but they have to comply with the World Trade Organization's regulations. This is to do with the global food security. Then we have something to do with the fishing subsidies. The WTO passed a multilateral agreement that would curb harmful subsidies on illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing for the next 5 years to better protect global fish stocks. Since 2001, member states have been negotiating the banning of subsidies that promote overfishing. What do we understand by this? When we speak about fishing, fishing happens to be one of the important economic activity. It is also one of the important food items as well. But there are few countries like China who have exploited fishing. What they underdo is overfishing as well. So when they engage in overfishing, they are also providing subsidies to those companies or organizations which are engaged in overfishing. So this particular agreement currently goes on to say if any subsidy is given where overfishing has been done, or illegal fishing has been done, or unreported fishing has been done, or unregulated fishing is present, in such case subsidies should be withdrawn immediately. However, these subsidies can continue if this overfishing is taken in a particular region for the sustainable progress. So ideally, overfishing subsidies should not be given, but if overfishing is done for making sure that this is for biological sustainability, in that case you would be able to continue it is what is this second initiative all about. So remember, when it comes to the overfishing, you're not supposed to provide the subsidies, but if this is for making sure that you're taking care of the fishing sector, making sure that this fishing is for the future and the sustainable progress, in that case alone you would be able to provide subsidy, says the second one. The third is in reference to electronic transmissions. What are these electronic transmissions? Back in the year 1998, World Trade Organization members agreed not to impose any types of custom duties on the electronic transmission. They also put on a moratorium as well, and this was periodically extended at successive ministerial conferences. What do we mean by electronic transmission? Let's say, for example, we have some of the digitized goods. Let's say we have a printed ebook, or let's say for example we have a software, or let's say for example we have a video game, or let's say for example we have a music, where this is transferred from one country to another. So there is no physical transfer. If it is a physical transfer, let's say for example you're carrying an iPhone, in that case a country would be able to impose custom duties. Or you're picking up a laptop, you are able to pick up only one laptop from United States of America and get it to India. If it is something more than that, what you would be imposed is with custom duty. In this particular case, what you have is a physical quantity. In this particular case, you have a product. This is tangible in nature. But what if you are sending a music from one country to another? What if you're transferring a software from one country to another? What if you are sending video game from one country to another? In all these cases, custom duties are not imposed. So in the 12th Ministerial Conference, member countries agreed to extend their current moratorium on not imposing custom duties on electronic transmission until 13th, scheduled to take place in December 2023, and 105 countries, which includes US, UK, Australia, China and Japan among others, had sought an extension of the moratorium, with India and South Africa being in opposition. So you have countries like USA and United Kingdom, so on and so forth. They did not want custom duties to be imposed by the countries, but you also have critics like India and South Africa who wanted to impose custom duties on electronic transmissions. What do we understand by electronic transmission? A software which can be downloaded, or it can be transferred from one country to another, or a video game such which does not require any physical barrier, or it is not a tangible product, which is called as the electronic transmission. So countries like United States of America and United Kingdom wanted to make sure that custom duties are not imposed on these type of digital transactions, but you had countries like India and South Africa which wanted to have imposition on these custom duties as well. But as of now, what we have is a moratorium, which means there is a delay, and this particular issue will be discussed in 2023. What is the importance of the custom duties? When we speak about custom duties, what exactly happens? There is an import of a product that comes from one country into another. So if it is a physical product, we would be able to impose taxes, and these taxes collected can be used for the welfare of that particular country, for example in India. Similarly, if we are able to impose custom duties on video games or softwares, what India would be able to generate is money. They would be able to collect taxes as well. This can be used for the welfare program. So when you consider developing countries like India, they said that since these are something which are moved from one country to another on a digital platform, we want to impose custom duties, we want to raise money, but the developed countries did not allow it. Why did they go ahead with such moratorium? That is because as of now, we are towards the COVID-19 issues. There are multiple people who have been hit by this pandemic. So let's not discuss it for now, and let's take it forward in 2023 is what the developed countries said with respect to the electronic transmission. Finally, we also have to discuss about the COVID-19 vaccine production, where the WTO members agreed to temporarily waive intellectual property patents on COVID-19 vaccines without the consent of the patent holder for about 5 years, so that they can easily manufacture them domestically. But do remember, this is just restricted to the vaccines. The waiver is limited only to the vaccines as per the agreement, and not other treatments like testing or other COVID-19 related technologies. These were some of the key takeaways or the outcomes from the 12th Ministerial Conference. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says revisiting social justice under the Dravidian model. You don't have to go through this entire article. All that you have to understand from this article is in reference to affirmative action and whether this affirmative action should also be introduced into the private sector. What do we understand by this? As of now, when you look into the reservation, what do we have? We have reservation in the public employment. We also have reservation in the education as well. This is also for the private as well. But when it comes to the employment, it is only restricted to the public employment. So the question now is, should it also be implemented? That is the employment reservation or the affirmative action. Should it also be taken into the private sector? That is what the whole article is all about, for which we will have certain statistics, for which what we will have is relevant data where the author has taken it with respect to Tamil Nadu. When we speak about social justice principles in Tamil Nadu, it was initially emphasized and propagated by Periyar, who fought for community-based presentation while fighting the evils of the caste system. When you look at the historical picture of India, the country of India historically and even now as well in large sections of the society, we are based on the so-called caste system. So when we are based on the caste system, what happens? There are certain castes which are so-called upper caste who are able to derive some of the economic advantages. They also have ensured that knowledge or education is only carried forward in a legacy or in the form of a caste system. This had to be rooted out. So what we had was a historical injustice. To remove this historical injustice that was prevalent in Tamil Nadu, we had some of the fighters like the Periyar who wanted to remove caste system in Tamil Nadu. And when we speak about the affirmative action, one of the tools of the affirmative action happens to be reservation. Reservation is given to the SC/ST community. Reservation is also given to the other backward classes as well. So if we consider the report in Tamil Nadu, what is the report saying? The report of the first backward classes commission in 1970 highlighted the unequal distribution of reservation benefits in favor of certain communities within the backward caste. What exactly happens? You have the SC/ST community, you also have the OBCs as well. These people are given a reservation. Let's say for example, in OBC alone, let's say there are about 5 subcastes. Let's say there is a caste A, there is a caste B, there is a caste C, there is a caste D, and we also have another caste E. Ideally, what should have happened? All these castes should have been represented equally. But because there is a certain community which has more representation within the OBC, they are able to extract all the advantages and the other OBC communities are not able to extract the advantage. So ideally, if we are speaking about the OBC reservation, all these communities which are part of the other backward classes should have been able to extract the reservation advantage. But in certain cases, there are only few communities who are able to extract this advantage at the cost of the others. Then the government set up a second backward class commission in the year 1982 to assess whether this is correct or not. The commission under J.A. Ambasankar reiterated that unequal distribution of benefits among the backward classes. So it was only few castes who were able to generate the advantage at the cost of the others. Now, if you look into the statistics, according to All India Survey on Higher Education 2019 and 20 report, 86% of the colleges and 44% of the universities in Tamil Nadu are owned by the private sector, with reservation not being applicable in the private sector in terms of employment. There is only 11% of the faculty from the SC community in Tamil Nadu, according to this report, even though OBC represent more than 70% of the teaching positions in Tamil Nadu. SC/STs and the minorities are underrepresented. So what we have in this particular part is the clear picture of affirmative action. So what is affirmative action? Affirmative action basically means that because there have been historical injustice, because there have been some problems in the past, because there are people who are segregated on the basis of race, disability, gender, sexual orientation, education, ethnic, race, so on and so forth. They were not able to get equal opportunities. So for them to get equal opportunities, we are providing some reservation, which is what is called as affirmative action. After 1990s, when it comes to Tamil Nadu and also in India as well, what has happened? We have the private sector which has involved. The government until 1990 was the major stakeholder. We had what is called as the closed economy, but after 1990, we opened up most of the sectors where private sector also started participating as well. And once we have the private sector participating, remember that public employment is where the reservation is present, but this is not same when it comes to the private sector. So this article currently goes on to say that if you look into the statistics, when you look into the employment opportunities, it is comparatively less for the SC/STs in the private sector. So can we think of providing reservation in the private sector? So the author says yes. The author goes on to say that the state government should pursue the policy of reservation in the private sector, which one of the principal political parties had supported in the election manifesto. So in this discussion, what we are going to focus is that yes, affirmative action or reservation will have to be provided, and at the same time we will also discuss some of the arguments which say that this reservation should not be applicable to the private sector. First, let us look at arguments which say that yes, reservation should also be extended to the private sector. When we speak about government, what is happening of late? The government is privatizing number of industries. Let's say for example, we have the government which has privatized number of sectors. Earlier, before 1990, most of these sectors were under the control of the government, but after 1990, most of these industries, even the industries which are doing well, are also privatized as well. We also had the government which came up with the IPO for the LIC as well. So number of industries which were once under the public sector, where employment opportunities were provided as part of the public employment, have now been removed because the government has incorporated privatization of these companies or the industries. Since most of these industries are no more government, are completely private, since the jobs which were earlier under the government control are no more under the government control, yes, as part of the historical injustice, we have to bring this very idea of reservation to the private sector. Why? Because the jobs are reducing. In the government sector, there were lot number of jobs earlier up until the 1990, but after the 1990, it is the private sector which has taken over. Since it is the private sector which has taken over, the government is privatizing as well. The government has given away its share to the private sector. We need to introduce this so that these people are also economically empowered and socially empowered is the first argument. The second argument is in terms of the affirmative action. When we speak about affirmative action, as I just discussed, it is about historical injustice, because there have been a grave historical injustice perpetuated upon a specific caste or a particular religion, or it can be a sexual orientation, or it can be a race or a disability. These people have become the major people who have suffered at the hands of the others. So affirmative action is not about government or private, but it is about empowering them, and only if we are able to empower them, uplift these people, all that matters is we are creating an equal start. For them to have an equal start, what we require is an affirmative action. So it does not matter whether it is government or private. All that matters is whether they are given the equal start, whether they are able to remove this historical injustice. So the second argument is, as part of the affirmative action, it does not matter whether it is government or private. All that we have to do is empower these people so that they have a same start, same line of start, which is why we have to ensure that reservation is also carried forward in the private sector. The third is in terms of the responsibility. What is the responsibility that we are speaking about? When we speak about the society, we have government as well as the private. When we speak about government, yes, they collect the taxes and it is their responsibility to perform certain actions. But if we speak about the private is also part of the society as well. They are also extracting all resources from the society as well. So there is a certain sense of responsibility on these private people as well. And because they also utilize the public infrastructure, they also make use of the government avenues as well. They also have the responsibility. They also have to cater to the historical injustice. They also have to make sure that people are empowered over a period of time. Since they have the responsibility, being the compatriots of the country, they have to make sure that this provision is extended to the private sector. These are some of the arguments which says that yes, reservation should also be taken up at the private sector. This is one part. We will also discuss what is the other part as well. Why this should not be extended to the private sector. When we speak about innovation and performance, what is innovation? Innovation is coming up with new things. And when it is about innovation, whosoever, irrespective of the race, religion, caste, nothing matters to us. All that matters is the merit. If a person has the merit, if he is able to reach a particular benchmark, that all matters. All that happens when it comes to the innovation industry, or when it comes to the technological domain, or when it comes to new areas of improvisation, the only thing that matters is merit. If you are able to meet up to this merit standards, you will be taken up irrespective of which religion or caste you belong to. So reservation should not be there in the private sector, because private sector is focusing on innovation, and if reservation is brought into picture, the innovation may suffer and the standards may fall, the performance may fall, and ultimately the competitive advantage that a company will have will also fall. So this reservation should not be extended to the private sector. The second is in terms of the international standards. What do we understand by international standards? Let's say, for example, you have a company like Facebook or Google or any other company which operate in India. Why do they operate in India? Because you have the government which is wanting to expand the horizons of business to government deals as well. And when they come and operate in India, they also want to take profits as well. They also want to provide jobs in India as well. If you are imposing this particular criteria that you have to provide reservation to so and so person without any merit, in that case these companies may not accept it. So international standards will fall. Only criteria that they look at, we are going to keep a benchmark, and if they are able to meet this benchmark, if they have a criteria, if they are meeting to this criteria, that is all that matters. Rest of the other matters will not come into picture. So the government should not force these companies to accept the reservation in the private sector. Second argument. The third argument is in terms of the government approach. When we speak about government, it is the responsibility of the government to create the jobs. It is the responsibility of the government to take care of the people. It is why it is selected. We have the representatives. That is why they collect taxes as well. We also make sure that these taxes are used for the welfare schemes and programs. So if the government wants to do, it can do anything at the public level in terms of the public employment, but they should not be pushing the same into the private sector, because the private sector is not selected by the people. They're not getting any taxes whatsoever, but instead they are paying the taxes. So it is the responsibility of the government to cater to these sections of the people, and this should not be pushed on the private sector. The private sector has no responsibility whatsoever. It is only into profit making. So it is in this particular backdrop that the responsibility is entirely on the government, and such responsibilities should not be pushed on the private sector. This means that it is the government alone which has to strive for the so-called affirmative action, and the private should not be engaged into it. And finally, we have the government which collects taxes from the people as well as from the officers as well, and they also have the corporate social responsibility. So the private organizations are already doing enough for the society. Yes, they are part of the society, which is why they are paying the taxes. They are part of the society, which is why they are also engaging themselves in the corporate social responsibility. So why should the private engage in such reservation things? So it is the government's responsibility are some of the other arguments. As part of the assignment, you put on the comment section whether this reservation as an affirmative action, should it be extended to the private sector? Please put them on the comment section. Now let's look into the next article. This article says petty patents can boost R&D. Let us try and understand what is this article all about. We have the Global Innovation Index. According to the Global Innovation Index, India has been ranked 46th in the WIPO's Global Innovation Index of 2021. If you go back to the year 2015, India's ranking was at 81 and what we currently are placed is at 46th. So what has India done? India has been able to improvise on this innovation front. If we speak about this global innovation front, what does it look into? It looks into two important parameters. One is the innovation input sub-index. The other is the innovation output sub-index. So it looks at institutions, human capital research, infrastructure, market sophistication, business sophistication as part of the innovation input index, and as part of the innovation output index it looks into knowledge and technology outputs as well as the creative outputs. On the basis of all these aspects you have the global innovation index which ranks the countries. So India has improvised. So in 2015 it was at 81 and now what we have is improvisation in the form of 46th rank. Similarly, in the Digital Economic Report of 2021 released by UNCTAD, we have exceeded the expectations as well. But one thing that we have to focus is on the other important countries. If you look into China, China occupies 12th rank in GII, and if you look at Japan, it is at 13th position. Yes, we are able to improve over a period of time, but we are still lagging behind China as well as Japan. So this article currently goes on to say that India has to constantly improvise on its innovation front, and ultimately if we are able to increase this innovation over a period of time, what we will be able to increase is the output in the country. We would be able to increase the growth in the country, and if growth increases we would be able to provide jobs for the people, and ultimately the nation will prosper as a whole, says this article. So this article currently goes on to say that if we are able to increase the innovation, we will have self-reliance in technology, Atmanirbhar in technology, and this will further give impetus to the overall achievements in terms of India's contribution. But there are some concerns with respect to where the problems are. One is the gross R&D expenditure as a percentage of GDP is 0.7%, which is very low as compared to the other countries. So if we speak about the investment in the R&D, what we have is minuscule investments that Indian businesses are making. In fact, the government is also not making much investment when it comes to the R&D expenditure. So the first major concern is we should have expanded on the research front. We should have invested more money. We should have infused a lot of finances, but that is not happening in the country. The R&D expenditure is mainly from the government, with only about 30% of the GRD being spent by the business enterprises. Even if these business enterprises are spending, it is mostly in the pharma sector as well as in the auto sector. But let's consider what is happening in United States of America. You have number of countries which are fighting amongst each other, fighting in an healthy way. There is a lot of competition. Let's say for example, you have SpaceX and you also have Amazon. You also have Amazon fighting it out with Google. Then you also have companies like Microsoft and Apple. So they are infusing a lot of money. There is healthy competition. They're fighting out tooth and nail. So this is what is happening in United States of America. Such is not happening in India. So the government should nurture, should encourage, should push the Indian private companies to compete amongst each other. And ultimately, we have to increase this percentage of the finances. Though the number of patent filings has been increasing, the patents granted continue to remain low. It has been observed that many patent applications fail to satisfy three-pronged test of patent, which is novelty, inventive step as well as utility. So when we speak about patents, the article currently goes on to say that this is an exclusive right that is given to an individual for about 20 years. So that particular person who has invented will be able to exclusively produce that product for about 20 years. So if a patent has to be given to that that person or an organization or to an individual, it has to meet three criteria. One is novelty, which means it has to be new, it has to be something unique, it has to be established for the very first time. This has to be an inventive step, and there should be utility because of that particular product. Only if it is able to meet all these three parameters, that is when patent will be given to that individual or an organization. But what is the problem right now in India? When it comes to the patents, what we have seen is increasing number of patents that are filed, but ultimately this is not resulting into actual patents. So we are filing a lot of patent application, but this is not fructifying. We are not able to come to a logical conclusion, and these patents are not granted. So it is in this particular backdrop, the author goes on to say that we have to bring a lot of reformation in the sector. So what are the changes that we may have to introduce? First, raise expenditure in the R&D segment. India needs to raise gross R&D expenditure as a percentage of GDP upwards to about 2% of the GDP as observed in the leading innovative nations. So other nations are able to infuse a lot of money. This is happening from the government side. There is healthy competition on the private side. So India will also have to invest on the R&D front so that we have more innovation, and this must be as much as 2% of the GDP. Then we require supportive policy. What do we understand by supportive policy? The governments both at the union and the state level must support and incentivize R&D activities through policies such as weighted tax deductions, partial funding for the specific R&D projects undertaken by business enterprises. Notably, subsidies of up to 50% of the project cost have been made non-actionable under the World Trade Organization rules. Also, products based on indigenously developed technology could be given product tax concessions, and income tax concessions be given to the innovators to encourage innovation. So what the author is asking is for the government to come up with supportive initiatives. So these supportive initiatives should basically focus on government giving some subsidies, giving them tax holidays, giving them other partial funding programs, so that these people will be ultimately motivated to invest more in this particular sector. As of now, we did discuss that the private are not investing much on the R&D sector. So in order to encourage them, nudge them to invest more on the R&D, the government will have to provide some supportive policies, that is through subsidies, through incentives and other programs is the second method. The third is the flexible patent system. A major challenge with the current patent system is that it fails to encourage minor innovations, since the criteria for granting rights considers the novelty of the invention while overlooking minor adaptive innovations. So going forward, you're just not looking at major patenting rights. Even if it is a jugaad, even if it is a small one, you can give exclusive right for about 3 years or about 5 years. So it need not be a novel one, it need not be something of a new one, but even if it is a small innovation, you can push such people so that they can be given patent for, let's say, about 2 years or 3 years. So the author goes on to say that such models have already been practiced in South Asian countries, and as a result, these countries have seen an improvisation. So we have to adopt such principles even in India. Petty patents regime provides protection to minor incremental innovation. They provide a limited period of protection, about 5 to 10 years, in contrast to 20 years. But more importantly, they have less stringent requirements as well as procedures. The petty patents would encourage domestic enterprises to undertake minor adoptive innovations, paving the way for significant innovations in the near future. And this augurs the growth of R&D segment in India. So going forward, the government will have to capitalize on these initiatives, push the private sector, and ultimately when they progress, when government progress, the nation as a whole progresses. So what we have to do is extract the potential, tap into the opportunity, and ensure that the R&D culture in India prevails over a period of time, so that we can improvise on the innovation index. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says recognizing the compulsory women worker. Let us try and understand what is this article all about. We have the Center for Monitoring Indian Economic, which recently reported that the labor participation rate of the rural women was about 9.92% in March 2022 compared to about 67.24% for the men. So this article currently goes on to speak about those women who are facing a lot of challenges in the rural area. What are these challenges and what needs to be done by the government in the near future? What are the challenges faced by the women in the rural areas? When we speak about the challenges, the first major challenge happens to be lack of fixed employment opportunities. Rural women have had to often look for different employment opportunities. While farm labor activities provide seasonal job opportunities, during the off-season period, rural women workers are pushed into looking for job opportunities in the construction site or work as a migrant worker or perform other odd jobs as well. So basically, what we are looking at is the issues that the women are facing in the rural sector. When we speak about women, they are actively engaged in the agriculture sector, but agriculture sector does not work throughout the year. So during these odd times where they are not able to push themselves into the agriculture sector, they have to find other avenues. They enter as workers in the construction site and they also work in multiple other areas as well. They also move to other regions as migrant workers. These are some of the issues that they are facing because they are not compensated equal to that of the men. And when we speak about the agriculture sector, they are also suffering because there is mechanization of the agriculture. As a result, the number of people who were earlier employed were far in excess, and now these people have become what is called as the disguised laborers. So the first major issue is lack of fixed employment opportunities for the women in the rural sector. Then there are challenges in work. Work at the construction site is mostly part-time and needs migration from their villages. And since they are not registered as the construction workers, they do not get some of the benefits and the incentives that are provided by the Construction Workers Welfare Board. The third major challenge is in terms of the Manrega. The Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act offers work opportunities for rural workforce, but this too is plagued by some challenges. As against the guaranteed 100 days of work, there have been reports of work availability days being less than the mandated number of days. If 100 days of work is what they have to be provided, these women are not provided 100 days of work, and even if the work is provided, some of them are physically challenging. When we consider the biological differences between a man and a woman, a man biologically may be superior to another woman. He would be able to perform some of the physically challenging work as well, but the same work cannot be undertaken by the women. But in Manrega, what is happening? There are women who are giving challenging positions, they're given challenging work which they are not able to do, and ultimately they are not paid. Even if they are paid, they are underpaid. That is the major problem. Added to it, some of the other basic daycare facilities like taking care of the children are not provided at the Manrega sites, which is why they are not entering this domain as well. So what is the way forward? What are the recommendations given by the author? First, we have to provide them minimum wages as well. When we consider the wages, as of now we have discussed in the past as well that when it comes to the men, they are paid more. When it comes to the women, they are underpaid. So going forward, both the men and the women should be provided equally, and there should be minimum wage for a particular work. So this is on the papers, but this has to be executed and implemented at the bare level. Then what they require is the financial support. As of now, landless manual laborers in rural area, especially the women, should also be provided the cash support so that they would be able to sustain their family and they would be able to contribute to the economy as well. We have to improvise on the working conditions. As we discussed, the daycare conditions, taking care of the children is also an obligation of the women. She has to feed the baby as well, she has to take care of the growth of the baby as well. So in this particular case, they have to provide some of the conditions which is worker friendly in that particular area. And finally, we have to engage with the data driven policies. What do we mean by data driven policies? This basically means the government will have to conduct the survey, the government will have to understand how many people are working, what are the challenges that they are facing, what are the concerns that they are facing, and these issues and concerns will have to be addressed. The plight of the rural women will have to be taken into picture, and suitable recommendations and its implementation will also have to be monitored. Yes, we do a lot of surveys, but these are ultimately biting the dust. This should not be the case, and actual implementation should be monitored, says the author. These are some of the recommendations in order to enhance the possibility of women to empower themselves. Now let's look into the mains practice questions. Write a note on key takeaways from the 12th Ministerial Conference of the World Trade Organization. Next question: should the government pursue the policy of reservations in the private sector? Critically analyze. Please write all your answers on the comment section, peer review, and do give positive feedback to your friends' answers. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.